Okay then guys, so at the moment we are on Whitehall, which was named after the Palace of Whitehall, which burnt down in 1698, and that was the home to kings such as Henry VIII and William III. But this whole general area is pretty much known as Her Majesty's government, because you've got some very important buildings along here. Along this road you've got the Home Office, the Foreign Office, the Treasury, and right behind me here we have number 10 Downing Street. You all know what that is? So that is the home of our Prime Minister, current Prime Minister Theresa May. Why is she still here? Nobody knows, but she's really clinging on in there, which is great. So yes, this has been home to our Prime Minister since Robert Walpole in 1732, and all Prime Ministers have lived there, all bar one, which was our last Prime Minister, David Cameron. He actually lived at number 11 because it's slightly bigger apparently. Just wanted some more space. But we stop here because it is mentioned at the very beginning of the Half-Blood Prince, and this is actually where the book begins. And this is when Cornelius Fudge from the Ministry of Magic goes to visit the British Prime Minister to tell him about the return of Voldemort and the Death Eaters. It's another tense time. This is also where Kingsley Shacklebolt is sent to be a bodyguard as well. But as the reader, this is the first time that we know that the Muggle world knows about the Wizarding world, so it's quite a big part in the plot, but they never actually decided to film here, so this isn't in any of the films. We kind of didn't know why. We thought maybe it was down to security reasons, like how are they going to get permission to film at number 10 Downing Street. But then we found out they actually filmed the latest Mission Impossible film here and a One Direction music video, so that definitely wasn't the reason. But my favourite fact about number 10 Downing Street is that it is home to Larry the Cat, and he is the official mouser of the house at number 10. He's basically the most important person in there. But yeah, I kind of thought maybe they didn't film there because they didn't want to introduce him to Crookshanks or something. I don't know. But either way, it's just in the books. We're going to go this way. No? Okay, so the first time we see this area is again in the Order of the Phoenix, when Harry and Arthur have just travelled from Westminster Station. They've walked along Whitehall and they arrive here to this corner, specifically right here, because this is the guest entrance to the Ministry of Magic, people. Unfortunately, the red telephone box was a prop. They brought it in specially for filming. I don't know why they don't just put one here anyway for us guys. It would be so much better. But yeah, it was a prop, and that is where, of course, they go inside, they dial magic, and they shoot down into the Ministry. But we see this area again in Deathly Hallows Part 1, when Harry, Ron and Hermione, this is the bit that you're talking about, Harry, Ron and Hermione need to make the Polyjuice Potion from the 3 hairs of the Ministry employees so that they can gain access to the Ministry of Magic. So, they come back to this area. Ron heads over to that corner right there, just underneath Scotland Place, as you can see here. As he is waiting for Mafalda Hopkirk to come around that corner there. Mafalda's just about there, and Hermione is stood in front of this gate here wearing the Cloak of Invisibility. So as she approaches her, Hermione stuns her, she falls over backwards, Ron picks up her legs, and they carry her inside where Reg Catamol and Albert Runcorn are already knocked out. Now, as a location scout for the production company, this is where you're going to want to have the Ministry of Magic. You are surrounded by really important government buildings. You're in the heart of the British government. But does Scotland Yard mean anything to anyone? No? So, we are at the original headquarters for London Metropolitan Police, and this building here was the original headquarters, and that was founded in 1829. And then the Special and Serious Crimes Unit, which dealt with all the really horrific crimes, including some of the Jack the Ripper cases as well, they were named Scotland Yard, so it was named after this area. And even though their headquarters are no longer here, they're now called New Scotland Yard, so they always carry the name with them. But yes, so it's a very important area, especially to us Brits. It's very well known. But now these buildings belong to the Ministry of Defence, these buildings here. Those buildings belong to the Civil Service, and behind those doors there you've got the stables for the London Metropolitan Police. so it's a very important area. But they also really loved the look of the area, they loved this curve of the street and the beautiful tall buildings, the architecture, and they really loved that bridge there. They loved it so much, they built a second one. As you can see from this photo, that building there is that building down there. So they literally built another bridge using set right across this road. And they did that, one, because they liked the look of the bridge, it's quite cute and quirky looking, but two, there was a really ugly doorway that they wanted to just cover up. So yeah, they actually went to the effort of building another bridge. And they also used visual effects just to make it look a bit better as well. And they used visual effects on this metal gate here as well. So in the film it's like wooden paneling if you watch it. So we're going to go down this way and I'll show you the employees' entrance to the Ministry of Magic. But if anybody wants to pretend to be Ron, go take a photo. You guys do your thing, nobody's judging here. You can go pretend to be Rupert Grint, or you could like Photoshop in a telephone box or something. But if not, I'll walk really slowly this way. Do it, just set it now.
Hey Ron!
Right.
And then you can do it for the rest of your life if you just get it out of the way now. Do you guys take a photo? Okay then guys, so again in Deathly Hallows Part 1, Harry, Ron and Hermione have now turned into the 3 Ministry employees. They come around this corner and they head down to the statue of the dude on the horse. The dude on the horse is Prince George, Duke of Cambridge. He was a field marshal in the army. Apparently he wasn't a very good one, but he's still got a statue on Whitehall. So they had to close this road for a whole day for filming. It was a huge annoyance to a lot of Londoners, but who cares because it's Harry Potter, so it doesn't matter. And that is where they built the old-fashioned gentleman's toilet sign right in front of the statue. And that is of course where they go down the stairs, they wait behind the cubicle doors and they flush themselves down the toilet into the Ministry of Magic. That is where they're met by hundreds of really down, glum-looking witches and wizards making their way to work, which is exactly like the Muggle world, especially in London. But we're going to head this way towards Trafalgar Square. It's Trafalgar Square, and this is the famous Admiral Lord Nelson's column. Now the square was named after the Battle of Trafalgar, which was in 1805, and that was between the British and the French and the Spanish. And it was just as the French and the Spanish were surrendering that Lord Nelson walked out onto the bow of his ship and he got shot by a French musketeer just as it was all ending. Now the story goes that the crew of his ship wanted to preserve his body, so naturally they put him in a barrel of brandy. On returning to British shores though, they realised that that barrel was empty. The British had drank the lot with a dead body inside, but there we go, we're British. This area is also famous for having one of the country's smallest police stations, and that is right over there in that lamppost with a tiny little black door. That is because around the 1900s up to the 1920s there was a huge rise in anarchism and people used to come here, gather, get really angry and have huge protests. So yeah, they had a tiny police station to make sure everything was alright. But this area is also in the Guinness Book of World Records for hosting the world's biggest ever film premiere, and that was back in July 2011 for Deathly Hallows Part 2, the final film. So normally film premieres are shown at one theatre, that is Leicester Square Odeon, which is just behind the National Gallery over there. For this premiere they showed it at 3 theatres. On top of that they had the world's longest ever red carpet running from the bottom of the column all the way to Leicester Square Odeon. It was over 455 metres long. It took the cast hours to walk down it just signing and talking to fans. But you can also see they had a huge screen set up right in front of the column here, and that is where they invited 100,000 lucky Harry Potter fans to come and stand in the square and watch the film for the very first time. It was a huge occasion, and obviously it was raining as well, as you can see from all of the umbrellas here, but it didn't dampen anyone's spirits. But you may also recognise this area from the very beginning of the Half-Blood Prince, because this is the beginning of the Death Eater's flight. So the Death Eaters fly around the square, around the column, and they head off down the Strand, which is just that road there. And if you find yourself down the Strand while you're here, you'll also realise it is home to the real-life Gringotts. So Gringotts is at Australia House, which is the Australian embassy. We don't have time to head down that way because we're going to go this way, so follow me. Okay, so just a quick stop here, guys, to point out this is the National Portrait Gallery. It's kind of like the sister gallery of the National Gallery. But this is home to hundreds and hundreds of portraits of famous royals and non-royals. And it's a really big deal to have your portrait hanging here. If you have your portrait hanging here, it's like you've totally made it. You're a big star. But Daniel Radcliffe is actually the youngest ever non-royal to have his portrait hanging here at the age of 16. So by that point, he was pretty bloody famous. And they also had a portrait of the three of them together, Harry, Ron and Hermione. But we are now heading into the West End Soho district. Leicester Square is literally just round to the left there. This is the huge musical and theatre district. This is where a lot of the actors from the Harry Potter films have also been on stage here. In the past few weeks we've had Luna Lovegood. She was starring in Disco Pigs just down the road from here. We also had Professor Umbridge and Bartimus Crouch Jr., but thank God they're no longer here because they were evil. And literally today I went to go see a play with Moaning Myrtle in it, and it was awesome at the Old Vic. You should check it out, it was great. But we're going to head this way. Okay guys, this is the big one. This is Cecil Court, and this is the real life Diagon Alley, people. So this is a street that J.K. Rowling was writing about. This is where she was thinking about. This is a street that was very close to her heart. So it's an 18th century street. It was built in the early 1700s, and it used to be known as Booksellers' Way because this was where you would come to buy all of your books, specifically first edition books and children's books, which is why it was so important to J.K. Rowling. She knows a thing or two about children's books. So yes, beautiful little street, but it was written in the Philosopher's Stone, or the Sorcerer's Stone, depending on where you're from, that Harry and Hagrid are walking down Charing Cross Road, which is just this road here. You can see the sign up there. And they're making their way to the Leaky Cauldron, and they make a right down a small alleyway, this being that alleyway. We're going to walk down it in a minute, but you'll see that there's lots of really weird occult bookshops and strange antiques. This shop during the day you can get your tarot cards read and a psychic reading. That shop there you can buy Harry Potter money. The shop at the bottom is called the Witch Ball. And this shop here you can buy first edition signed copy of Harry Potter. I think it's selling for about £20,000. So just a bit of pocket money, that's fine. But this is also where they got a lot of their inspiration for the Diagon Alley, which is on set at Warner Brothers Studios. Has anyone been to Warner Brothers Studios?
I have.
Literally the best place in the world? Yes, yeah. So if you get a chance to go to Warner Brothers Studios, please go. It's heaven on earth, and it's got all of the sets from the Harry Potter films, and they've recently just put in the Forbidden Forest as well, and I just can't explain to you how good it is, so you have to go. But this is where they took a lot of their inspiration, because all these shop fronts are Victorian shop fronts, and it's Victorian style signage and writing and font and things like that, and the beautiful tall skinny buildings. And they put this into the films for the visuals. So yes, we'll walk down it now. Also, if there's any classical music lovers here, this is also the street that Mozart came to stay on in 1764. There's a little blue plaque just halfway down. But yeah, we'll walk down, take lots of pictures, guys. No, I wish I had. Yeah, for some reason, I don't know why we did that. I don't know if we had time to do it.
But where have been Ollivander's shop? Magic Wands.
Oh, well that's at the Diagon Alley. That's at the Warner Brothers Studios.
Uh-huh.
But it's not like they did it like
they do it themselves, yeah?
Yeah, they did pick out all that. Street is always finished off with a chipotle as well, so that works perfectly. But around the corner from Diagon Alley, you have Nocturn Alley, which is the scary dark art street. So it's in the second book, The Chamber of Secrets, where Harry and the Weasleys use flu powder to travel to Diagon Alley. Unfortunately, Harry mispronounces it. He ends up at Nocturn Alley. It's a bit scary for a while, but he bumps into Hagrid and everything is okay. But we are now going to go across the street to see the real-life Nocturn Alley. Big boy pants on. Let's go. This is Goodwin's Court. This is my favourite part of the tour because it's so old and it's so pretty. But this little street has been here since 1627. And it used to be like a little shopping street, and these windows here were like your classic shop windows. But building law back then stated that they weren't allowed to jut out any more than 10 centimetres. But the Harry Potter lot didn't listen to that, because this is where they got their inspiration for the Borgin and Burke's shop. I don't know if you can see that, whether it's a bit dark. But that's the home of the Vanishing Cupboard. They had the really big bow windows accentuated there, and this is where they got their inspiration for that. So yeah, this whole area back then was still a very artsy area, the same as it is today. And all the offices that the visual effects crew and the location scouts, they all worked in Soho and Covent Garden, which is all around here. And they obviously wanted to keep the films as close to the books as possible. They wanted to use British actors and actresses and British locations. So it's these streets that they used to walk around to get all of their inspiration for the films. They also took bits like these original gas lamps here. They're from the 18th century. Sorry. Thank you. And as you walk down, you'll see that all the door knockers on these doors here, they're unique original 18th century door knockers as well. But these buildings are grade 2 listed buildings, so it basically means they're protected. You can't touch them or change them because they're so historically important. But yeah, it's a gorgeous, gorgeous little street. We'll have a little walk down. I'll meet you on the other end, but again, take lots of photos. Quick stop here. This one isn't really Harry Potter related, but I like to stop here anyway because this is something else which is in the Guinness Book of World Records. But as you can see, this is Agatha Christie's The Mousetrap, and it's in its 65th year at this theatre, making it the longest running show of all time anywhere in the world, which kind of amazes me. But Agatha Christie is still the most successful author of all time, selling between 4 and 6 billion books. Billion, people. To put that into perspective, J.K. Rowling sold around 350 million, but she wrote 11 books and Agatha Christie wrote 85. So ratio-wise, it's kind of the same thing, right? I also like to point out that Ivy, that's quite a famous celebrity restaurant, celebrity hangout. That was built in the early 1900s, so anyone who's anyone eats at that restaurant. And of course, the Harry Potter lot have eaten at that restaurant as well. But we're going to head down this way. Who's read the script? Anyone? Yeah? What did you think? You didn't like it? Who else read it? Who else read it? Yeah, literally everybody I ask on the tour is always kind of like, I don't like it. But my argument to that is that it wasn't written like the other novels. It was written as a script, and it was written to be seen in this medium right here. So this is the Palace Theatre, and obviously this is Harry Potter, The Cursed Child, and it's in 2 parts. So both parts are about 3 hours long, so you have to buy 2 sets of tickets. You can either go see them all in one day or in 2 consecutive evenings. But it is amazing. I managed to go see it a few months ago because somebody on my tour gave me a ticket and I was just like, thank you. And it was incredible. Like, there's genuinely parts of it which you think have to be real magic. I can't work it out. It's one of the best-selling shows in the West End at the moment. I think it's sold out till about November 2018 we're on. Yeah, so There's a couple of ways you can still get tickets. Every Friday at 1 o'clock they have the Friday 40s lottery where they release 20 pairs of tickets for £20 each for the following Friday's show. I've genuinely known people cancel their flights back home because they won tickets and they had to go see it. It's that worth it. But if you are desperate to go see it, I've had a few people on my tours say that they'd gone in on the day and they'd had return tickets at the box office. So it's totally worth just going in, crying or pleading with the box office assistant and just checking to see if there's any spare. But for those of you who don't know, it's set 19 years after the last Harry Potter book, and it basically follows the lives of Albus and Scorpius, who are the sons of Harry and Draco Malfoy. Not together, separately, separate children. That would be a completely different play. But it's following their lives, how they're dealing with the legacy that their fathers left behind them and how they're getting on at Hogwarts. But yes, this production also kicked up a bit of a fuss when it was first announced because they're dedicated to what they call colourblind casting, and they cast the role of Hermione with a black actress called Noma Dumezweni. She's a Swaziland-born actress, absolutely amazing. She's won an Olivier Award, but unfortunately when it was announced there was a few so-called Harry Potter fans who weren't very happy about the whole thing. There was a huge storm on Twitter, but J.K. Rowling, ever the human rights activist, basically came out and said, well, I never wrote that Hermione was white, so you need to shut the hell up and get over it. Which we did, and now we've got an amazing production. But you also might recognise the name of this road here. This is Shaftesbury Avenue. Does that ring a bell to anyone? So, in Deathly Hallows Part 1, after the Death Eaters have crashed Bill and Fleur's wedding at the Weasleys, Hermione apparates the three of them to Shaftesbury Avenue and says, this is where my parents used to bring me and take me to the theatre. Now, for the die-hard Harry Potter fans, you will recognise that in the book, she actually apparates them to Tottenham Court Road, which is just down that way. But in the films, she apparates them to Piccadilly Circus, which is right at the end of Shaftesbury Avenue down there. Now for filming, the director said it was his worst filming experience ever because they couldn't get full permission to close down Piccadilly Circus just because it is so busy. So when they did film there, they had to contend with all these Harry Potter screaming fans trying to get in on the action and journalists flashing their cameras and all of London transport just driving through the shot. So yeah, they had a lot to contend with, but they got there in the end. But we are now going to head down to Tottenham Court Tube Station, Tottenham Court Road Tube Station just at the end of here, where we're going to be on the tube for 3 stops on the Central Line heading eastbound. We're getting off at St Paul's. Now, I've never lost anybody yet, but just to reiterate, it's 3 stops and we're getting off at St Paul's. So, good luck, let's go. Cathedral. This is the 4th version of the cathedral. The original was built in 604 AD, so a very long time ago. So the 3rd version burnt down during the Great Fire of London, as did the majority of the City of London and the buildings in it. But this one was rebuilt by Sir Christopher Wren, a very famous architect, in 1711, and he was most famous for designing the dome on top, which we'll see when we head round the other side. But Sir Christopher Wren is now buried in the crypt below St Paul's. So it's still a working cathedral, still have sermons and ceremonies here. You can go in and be a part of them, or if you want to walk around properly, I think it's about £18 to go in, and you can walk all the way up to the top and look around. But this is where Prince Charles and Princess Diana got married. They also had the funerals for Sir Winston Churchill, Margaret Thatcher and Lord Nelson here as well. But yes, it is the staircase leading up from the crypt up to the library which brings us here, as this is the geometric staircase, also known as the divination staircase. So this is the staircase in The Prisoner of Azkaban, which leads up to Professor Trelawney's classes. And it's in the film where Professor Trelawney says something to Hermione that she doesn't like. Classic Hermione gets annoyed and she drops the crystal ball and it rolls down the steps. At the end of the class, Harry, ever the gentleman, picks it up and takes it back to Professor Trelawney, and that is where she has her second ever real divination experience. But we see this staircase again in the next film, The Goblet of Fire, as it becomes part of the Turrus Magnus Tower, which is the biggest tower in Hogwarts, and it's the staircase that leads down from the Defence Against the Dark Arts classes. And in the film, this is when Mad-Eye Moody, who is actually Bartimus Crouch Jr. on Polyjuice Potion, he bumps into Neville Longbottom and he gives him the Gillyweed so that Harry can go on to win the second task in the Triwizard Tournament. Now, it's a really big deal for them to get permission to film in St. Paul's. They're usually really closed off. It's one of 3 films ever to get permission to film inside. One of the others was the 2009 Sherlock Holmes film. A lot of people also think that Mary Poppins was filmed here, especially the famous scene on the front steps, but as I'm sure some of you may know, that famous London-based film was actually all filmed on set in Burbank, California. Nowhere in London whatsoever. But we're now going to head around the corner and there's a really nice shot of the side and the dome on top, so just this way. You know your stuff. Okay then guys, so there's 2 things at this stop. First one, this building here, this is the City of London School for Boys, which is a public school, which is confusing because over here public school actually means private school. You basically have to have a lot of money to send your boy to this school. But this is where Daniel Radcliffe attended for 4 months after filming The Philosopher's Stone, and it was 4 months for a couple of reasons. One, they'd started filming The Chamber of Secrets, so they kept having to pull him in and out of class. It was quite disruptive to his education. But the second reason, the first film had come out, everyone knew who he was, the boys didn't like it very much, and he got bullied to hell, bless him. Who would bully Harry Potter? I don't know. These boys. So yeah, they had to pull him out after that, and all the main child stars after that got private tutoring on set, and they got a really high level of education. I'm sure most of you know that Emma Watson went to Brown University in America, and she also did a year at Oxford as well. So don't worry now guys, they're all fully functioning human adults, they are fine. Just a couple of drug problems.
Totally consistent with your character.
Yeah. Very true, very true. But we are also here for the Millennium Bridge, this beautiful little structure, because we see this first in the Order of the Phoenix when Dumbledore's army are flying to the Ministry of Magic, but we see it again officially in the Half-Blood Prince, again during the Death Eater's fight. So if you remember, the Death Eaters started back at Trafalgar Square, around the column, down Strand, through Diagon Alley, and they come along the river from this direction, which is geographically incorrect, but I'm okay with it. And they fly around the bridge and it eventually collapses. I've got a bit of a picture of it there if you see. It's a bit dark, but you can just make it out. And I'll let you into a secret, guys. This was CGI. They used visual effects for this. Definitely. Now, this wasn't mentioned. This wasn't mentioned in the books. J.K. Rowling didn't write about the Millennium Bridge. This was kind of put into the films. It's a bit of an inside joke to us Londoners. So back in June 2000, everyone was eagerly awaiting the opening of this bridge. It was really big news. So the day finally came. People started walking across it, and everyone was like, "Oh, it's a bit wobbly. Is it supposed to be wobbly?" And the architect was like, "No, it's not supposed to be wobbly." So he ordered its closure after 2 days. It stayed closed for a further 18 months, where they spent a further £2 million on restructuring and restabilising it. So when I say inside joke, it's for us London taxpayers who had to pay the bill. Ha ha ha. Now we're going to go across the bridge in a second. In front you'll see the Tate Modern, amazing modern art gallery. Again, it's free, worth checking out. To the left you'll see the Shard, the really tall building. A lot of people think that it looks unfinished, but it is actually finished. And you'll also see Tower Bridge as well, all lit up, looking beautiful. So yeah, we'll head across and I'll meet you on the other side. So this building behind me here is my favourite building in London. This is Shakespeare's Globe Theatre, and it's the third version of the theatre. So it's still a working theatre. You can get tickets for £5 to go see a show, and it is awesome. It is beautiful inside and out. But yeah, so the first version was built in 1599, so during the Elizabethan period, and this one was finally finished in 1997. It's the only legally allowed thatched roof in the whole of London. That is because the first version burnt down during a production of Henry VIII, where they set off a real cannon in the top part of the theatre. Naturally, the cinders caught fire to the thatch. The whole place burnt down within 2 hours. There was over 3,000 people inside. Luckily though, records show that nobody got hurt apart from one man's pair of trousers caught on fire, but the chap stood next to him, had a bottle of beer, poured it on him, everyone was fine. Alcohol saves the day again, people. It was fine. But this was a project developed by Sam Wanamaker, an American actor and director who spent his whole life fundraising to build this building. So yeah, he basically was like, why haven't us Brits done anything to commemorate the best writer of all time? So it took an American to come over and do that for us. But yeah, he died 4 years before its completion, so he never got to see the final product. But he is survived now by his daughter Zoe Wanamaker, who plays Madame Hooch, the Quidditch teacher, in all of the Harry Potter films. And she is now a trustee of this building. But also during the 1600s, this side of the river wasn't considered to be part of London. London was the north side of the river, and this side was known as Bankside. So people used to pay the ferryman a penny to bring them over the river, and this was basically like the party side of the river. This is where all the really dirty, nasty stuff went down, but they loved it. So over here you'd have bear baiting, cockfighting, prostitution, gambling. You'd have these sinful theatres. You'd have prisons and torture chambers, and this is where they'd have all the plague pits as well. It was not a nice place to be. But this is where they decided to have the second Leaky Cauldron. So the first Leaky Cauldron was over at Leadenhall Market, just over the river, which is this really colourful building here, beautiful building. And that is because the director of the first two films was Chris Columbus, an American director who also directed films like Home Alone and Mrs. Doubtfire. So really like happy, family-friendly, fun films, like really colourful. But by the time we moved to the third film, The Prisoner of Azkaban, we moved to the Mexican director Alfonso Cuarón. And as we all know, he decides to take it in a much kind of darker, grittier way. And so he decided to move the Leaky Cauldron over to an area which is more synonymous with that kind of atmosphere. And that is where we're going to go for our final stop along the river this way. So follow me, guys. For our last stop, but I just wanted to point out this is an amazing place to walk around. It's steeped in history. It's my favourite part of town. We just passed one of the oldest pubs in London. That was the Anchor. That was built in 1615. We also just passed the Clink prison there. That was an original medieval prison which was built in 1144. Down there you've also got the replica of the Golden Hind, which was the ship that Sir Francis Drake sailed around the world in. And here you've got the last remaining walls of the Palace of Winchester, and that was built in the 12th century. So it's a gorgeous area, but we're going to head down this way.
We got here on Monday, and so we're flying back tomorrow. Yeah, it's Okay, you made it. Everyone made it. Well done. So the
it's my favourite part of town. This is London Bridge Borough Market. You have to come back here on a Friday and Saturday because that's when the market is fully open and it is literally the best place. It's the best place for food and drink. I cannot recommend it enough for that. And if you're a coffee lover, Monmouth Coffee over there, hands down best coffee in London. But this is London's oldest market. It's been here since at least 1014, so it's over 1,000 years old, and it's just gorgeous. It's also a very popular filming location because of the beautiful railway arches and the tunnels that we have around here and the brickwork of the buildings as well. But it's this building right here under the bridge which we are here for, because this is where Alfonso Cuarón decided to have the second Leaky Cauldron. So back then when they were filming it was actually quite a famous little florist called Chez Michel. And it didn't have any of the paint or the decoration on the outside, and it's so annoying that it's there because that brickwork is about 150 to 200 years old, and I love it. But for the set on Harry Potter they kept the brickwork as it was. It's a bit dark but you can just make it out. So they kind of built like a stony concrete archway to the door, and that is the doorway to the Leaky Cauldron. So it's in the Prisoner of Azkaban where Harry gets picked up by the triple-decker purple night bus, which was a real bus, by the way. They had to put 8 tons worth of material in the bottom of it just to stop it from toppling over. So it goes over Lambeth Bridge where it squeezes in between the 2 red double-decker buses, and it screeches around this corner here onto Stony Street, slamming to a halt right in front of the Leaky Cauldron, gently knocking into the car parked in front of it. So Tom, the owner of the Leaky Cauldron, comes out to collect Harry and he takes him up to see Cornelius Fudge from the Ministry. And it's in the morning when Harry wakes up and he looks out of his bedroom window, and that's where they had a camera at the top there to scan the view of Borough Market and Southwark Cathedral just above us here. And that's where they kept the footage exactly as it was. They didn't add any special effects, they didn't use CGI, they kept it exactly as it was because it was already perfect the way it was. But this is where I leave you now. I want to thank you so much for coming with me, and thank God it didn't rain as well. But yeah, thank you so much for coming with me. If you did enjoy the tour, a TripAdvisor review would be amazing. But other than that, have an amazing time in London and safe onward travels. But yeah, thanks guys.